At day camp, we don't have rainy days. We have liquid sunshine. And it's not raining until we say it is. My brother lives in Seattle where it rains almost every day and nobody complains. As we camp directors like to say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inadequate clothing. Rainy days are more than a weather phenomena. They are a state of mind. And they're an amazing exercise in preparation. So put your galoshes on. It's time to get wet. This is the Day Camp Pod. Welcome back, our friends, to the Day Camp Podcast. I'm Andy Pritikin, Director of Liberty Lake in the Philly suburbs of New Jersey.
I'm Sam Thompson from Crystal Lake, Illinois, Crystal Lake Park District.
I'm Tiffany Gratton-McDuffie, founder of Purposeful Play, both in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Chicago, Illinois.
This is Cricket Snearing, ladies and gentlemen. We have an esteemed guest. Cricket is going to give her a little intro about herself, but I just want to say how I met Cricket. Cricket had been working for years, many camps, as she'll tell you. But when I first became a full-time camp professional in the mid-90s, my boss was like, okay, you're full-time. Now you have to volunteer for ACA. And he put me into the tri-state loophole where they put me in charge of programming for one of the tracks. And I was like, I don't even know where to get started for this because I had to do all the real program things at camp, that track. They called it Tri-State University at the time. And Skip Vickness, who was my boss at the time, he said, listen, you just have to make one call. Call Cricket Snearing. She knows all about this. She'll help you. And because I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't really give me the time of day, but Cricket picked up, and she was such a sweet friend right off the bat. She was big time help for me and helped mold Tri-State for that year with me. And then when I became the Tri-State chair, I pulled her in and made her one of the program chairs with me to make it work. And we've been friends for a long time. But Cricket, so I'm asking you, I know you've had a long star-studded career. All right. We're looking for the 2 to 3 minute extended elevator ride in a skyscraper origin story of how you got into camping and how you got to, through your career.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Girl Scout camp. Girl Scouting was big, and, learning to do a lot with nothing or a little, everything nature and all that kind of stuff. And I ended up coming east to work at a camp and ended up working for the Girl Scout Council full time and directed a camp in the Adirondacks and managed properties in 4 states. And I just really, when I worked there, became to love the whole idea of what do you do with rainy days and program stuff. I always have too much stuff, which, by the way, stands for sensational things used for fun the next time someone tells you have too much. And I left there and came to work for a private day camp outside of Philadelphia, Sesame Rockwood, did programming, hired staff, put together all the rainy day games, packets, all that kind of stuff, and ran a teen travel program. And then I retired 4 years ago. And I still think that planning for rainy days and being prepared is important. I've done sessions at Tri-State for many years with my good friend Joel Shapiro from Camp Ramaquoy. We both love to talk about rainy days and preparation. So that's kind of
she's underselling herself, by the way. Cricket has probably given, I don't know, 40, 50, 60 sessions on this kind of stuff and various things, as well as arts and crafts and kind of things. So it's really funny because Cricket, for her last chunk of time, how long were you at Sesame Rockwood? 20 years?
30.
So during that time, she became this rainy day guru, program guru and stuff. Yet she worked at Sesame Rockwood, hiring the staff. So she hired all the staff, and she ran the teen travel program, taking teens into hotels across the country and amusement parks. It was a little interesting way to use your talents in the summer, I'd say.
Yeah.
So I loved your STUFF acronym, by the way. It was very Michael Brandwein of you. My big thing with rainy days that I try to, when I talk to new staff, is to try to explain that it's not time to go into oh my God, it's raining, this is going to be horrible mode, but try to reframe it as a positive thing. Because especially if you're not having a really rainy summer, let's say it only rains a handful of times, if you're going about your business and you're sort of in that cycle of this is what we do every day. We come to camp and we go to assembly and we go to first period and then we go to swim. And, you know, as exciting as your camp is, it just becomes this sort of thing that you just do. And then all of a sudden the skies open up and, you know, it gives you an opportunity to reframe things and to do things you would not necessarily normally do, right? So if you don't normally do karaoke, you don't normally have dance parties, you don't normally do these kind of things, you can save stuff and kids can actually look forward to a rainy day, right? And my goal, what I tell my staff is I want the kids coming home that day and going, hey, yeah, it rained all day, but you're never going to believe what we did. Like we actually had an awesome time, right? So what are your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, I think you're exactly right, Andy. And I think that a lot of things, people like, well, we plan all this, we package things for bunks or groups or divisions, and we have everything planned, and then it never rains, so we had to do all that work. Well, you always want to have it ready that hopefully you never use it. And I think that one of the things, I was talking to my friend, Stephen Bernstein from North Star in Maine, and he said, you know, they planned a certain number of rainy day things, and then when it didn't rain near the end of the summer, they were really popular and they were great, and they went ahead and used them because they were activities they really wanted to do with the kids. I think my biggest thing is staff need to have some practice during staff orientation as to what's going to happen on a rainy day. They need some idea of what's going to be different. They need some input. They need to be able to share their ideas, and maybe somebody's got a great one.
So how do you do, let's talk about that for a second. How do you practice rainy days at like staff training?
I think a lot of it is, especially if you're going to ask staff for their input, is to have a session with what ideas do they have? What did they do when they were a kid that they love to do? Or what do they think could easily be done with their kids that they would like to do? Give them some input. If they have input in whether it's rainy day or regular programming or evening activity or anything, some buy-in will get them to be more involved and not just want to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
And I think it's also getting everybody involved, because I know that there was a big private day camp in New York that I did some consulting with years and years ago, and their pool staff didn't have to do any work on a rainy day. Well, that didn't make everybody else happy when the pool staff was sitting around, when the other people all had to be doing something, and getting everybody involved and having some buy-in. Right. And I also think that the less you change your schedule, the easier it is. You know, if this is where kids are going to go that day and they can't go to the ropes course, and you have a tent that those kids during those periods could still go to a place and the ropes staff could run an activity, it makes it easier to think about how you plan too. There's nothing worse, being an arts person, nothing worse than all of a sudden sending 40 more kids to arts and crafts. You know, because now they've done the project today that they were supposed to do tomorrow. And, you know, so that kind of thing is part of the prep, and getting staff to buy into what's happening, and that positivity. That's not always
well,
easy.
something you touched on, I want to talk about for a second, which is that at a lot of camps, it's very structured. The schedule is what it is, and you got to follow it like a militaristic grid, right? And then we expect the staff in moments like rain, or like if you have buses and you have counselors on the bus, you expect them to be creative and have a bag of tricks. And sometimes I think these young people, their brains are like, they get into, well, just tell me what to do and I'll do it mode. And yet we need them to be creative with this. So this is part of the training. It's that bag of tricks you're talking about. And like at Liberty Lake, like we literally call it like a bag of tricks. Like whether you're a counselor or a specialist, whatever you are at my camp, in your backpack, you better have something there in case the skies totally open up. Because at my camp, we don't go to a rainy day schedule kind of thing unless it's raining sideways or if it's thundering. If it's just a light drizzle, we're going about our business and we don't stop. I was not joking about the Seattle thing up front, but when it really starts deluging and nobody can move and you're stuck somewhere, right? You need something to pull out, whether it's a deck of Uno cards, playing cards, trivia is so easy. You
Yep.
got to have something set. And every single counselor, and you talked about, like, think about when you were a kid, like, what did you do in those moments? Now, by the way, we're all older. When we were kids, we didn't have a handheld device in our hands. We weren't watching a Disney movie to go to the supermarket, like, we actually had to be creative. I don't think these younger people have had that opportunity, to do that.
You also can't assume that they even know how to play Uno or Yahtzee or, some of the simple things that are easy, or the trivia, or, they'll play where you put your phone on your head and I have to guess what you are, but they can't think to have that on a deck of cards in their backpack that they could whip out and you could use the cards, because they're so used to, you're right, having that device. That's I think a big part of it.
I know with ours have to do lesson plans, and on there they have to put rainy day activities every week just in case. And really, we make sure they have a dice in their backpack, so you could do 4 corners anywhere, or there's lots of different games with just a dice. Or if they've got a water bottle, they can play electric fence with just a water bottle. So if you do some of those activities during training, then they realize, okay, these are good for transitions. They're good if I'm stuck somewhere. They're good for a rainy day, and they don't take much equipment.
It's old school stuff, Sam. That's what we're talking about. And
right.
that's the thing, is that we're raising these technology kids that everything is on an iPad, and they don't really know what dice is. The only kids in my camp that know what dice are kids that play Dungeons and Dragons. Otherwise, they have no idea.
Well, some of our directors, group leaders don't know because they're young, much younger.
That's what I'm saying. At my camp, I tell them all, bring a deck of cards. My camp is about an hour away from Atlantic City. I say, you know what? These kids are all going to learn how to play blackjack at some point. So time to teach them how to play, they could all add to 21. Let's do it.
Yeah. Andy, I like your comment too about if it's not lightning or thundering, that you just keep going on. I put on the show notes a picture of playing basketball in the rain. But we also have a slip and slide, and it's perfect during a rain day because you don't need to hold a hose on it. You can do the slip and slide as long as it's not lightning, and you can do lots of fun mud activities.
Oh, since you went there, Sam, let's just take this opportunity to talk about my friends at Commercial Recreation Specialists, okay, CRS, because they have an awesome product that I have. I was one of the first to get it. It's called the Zoom Flume. And what the Zoom Flume is, it's actually a slip and slide that is blown up sort of like with moon bounce material. And it's super long. It's got to be 20, 30 feet long. And we set it up. I mean, we have a lake. I know Sam does too. And we set it up so that we run water on it and they go tearing, onto it, head first, and they go scooting into the lake that way. But even if you don't have a lake, you can go down a hill, or even if you didn't have a hill, as long as you put some kind of padded thing on the other side, like gymnastics bats or something like that, it really, really is awesome. And it's a great thing. And that's one of those things I was talking about. At Liberty Lake, we save that for either rainy days or super hot days, right? And we have a bubble machine too. So we'll sometimes even bust out the bubble machine on that. So anyway, Commercial Recreation Specialists, the fine purveyors of the best recreation solutions to keep your camp going strong. Check out their website at crs4rec.com. CRS is serious about fun.
One of the things, well, just real quick, while you mentioned about, not lightning and, that kind of thing, is you have to have some discussion too about what is appropriate, and if you're in a location, when you don't move, because a lot of people know from experiences or from stories they've heard, or if you happen to show Who Will Care When I'm Not There video during staff training, water changes, where you could have done some creek walk before, the next thing you know, it's a raging river. And that counselor may not know how to make a good choice of what's okay and what the limits are and where you can be. But there's so much fun stuff out there. And if a kid comes home with some mud and they're wet, that's half the fun. And a lot of kids just don't have the opportunity to do any of that anymore.
All right, let's talk about that for a second, because we were talking about, Sam's talking about dice and, all these things, that nobody has bought since 1970. But seriously, jumping in the mud, jumping in puddles, all that kind of stuff, kids love it. they absolutely love it.
Mhm.
And I tell parents now, because I think that this younger generation of parents, these parents that are like in their mid 30s, early 40s, they actually want this from their kid. They want their kids getting dirty. So we had a whole generation of parents that were like, oh, I don't want a raindrop to land on my little veal's head because it might melt them and all that kind of thing, right? Now they're like, I want my kid getting dirty, muddy, scratched up, all that kind of thing, like we did when we were kids, right? Because they see this, how we sort of screwed up a generation. So I tell parents, I mean, it's unbelievable now that I've been doing this for 25 plus years, like the difference in how I talk about rainy days when I started versus how I talk about it now. It's not just because I'm wiser and I'm cockier or anything like that. It's because that's what the parents want to hear. It used to be, well, you know, we go inside and we play these games and they don't, you know, we don't this and that. It was just a controlled situation, right? Now, I tell them, just like I said, like we're playing until there's thunder, basically, or until, like I said, until it's raining sideways, and we jump in puddles. We like parents say, what happens when it rains at your camp? I say we jump in puddles, we get muddy, we have a good time, we sing and dance, and we have a great time. And the parents are like, awesome. That's literally what they want to hear. I think so. Right. And the funny thing is, I tell them this too, which is the truth, which is, if I was home and my kids were outside playing and it started raining, I would probably open the door and say, hey, come inside. It's raining. What are you doing? You're being crazy. Come on, come inside. Right.
Yeah.
But yet at camp, I'd be like, let's jump in that big puddle. Let's go, you know, let's do mud tug of war. Like, let's get dirty, you know, and they go for it. Kids love it. I think it's one of the favorite parts of camp.
I got to visit a camp here in Illinois that has a mud volleyball pit, and they feed it from their creek. And it's literally, it smells a little bad, but they have this mud volleyball pit that they can go in anytime.
Great. Kids love mud. Make mud pies.
I think our little ones would do it, but so I run sports camps, and so I always have this duality of kids who think they're too cool to play. Like the camp is called Purposeful Play, so that we can emphasize that they're playing with purpose, right? And this whole idea that they are to be tough and rough and cool all the time, really. I take pride and joy in like breaking it down, that you just get to go have fun for the sake of having fun.
You should show them some YouTube videos of rugby, like in the rain.
Right.
Show them
right.
getting some people getting muddy.
It's just bouncing on each other. So for rainy days for us, it was always a challenge because our camp is hosted, in the one in Milwaukee anyway, it's hosted in a church where we changed the sanctuary into a gym. And so of course, if it's indoor all day, the basketball players are like, yes, but I mean, there's only 5 on 5 on the basketball. So it's just like, that's not going to be sustainable for everyone. So we did a bunch of like running games. So like tag games, or like rock, paper, scissors bases, or like, I don't even know what the one is where you come together in the middle, so giant rock, paper, scissors. And we used a lot of like resources from Pinterest and Playworks, the Playworks game guide and things like that, in order to get kids moving and active and being able to enjoy the rainy days. The thing that I liked most though is that it created a bit of a pause, because we're so busy and running and basketball and track and soccer and go. Those were the days that we could really like implement some yoga, implement some mindfulness. And when we were, we would still go out if it was just drizzling. And then those were days where the kids could just like legit fish at the Urban Ecology Center, because they were like, okay, we can't do much of anything else. So they would just kind of like sit there and fish or canoe, or just like some of the slower activities. So for us, the rain was a reminder to like slow down.
Yeah, it's great. Like I was saying, it's a change of pace, right? And like at my camp, we're a screen-free place, you know, 100%. But if it's going to like really rain, well, we have a big giant screen we'll bust out, and we'll put a movie on a projector, you know. And for those kids, it's like, wow, we get to watch a movie at camp, because we would never do anything like that otherwise. So when I first started working at Harbor Hills Cricket back in the day, when I first called you, if it started raining, we loaded up the buses and took them to the movies, to the bowling alleys, and all this kind of stuff. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare.
That's why Harbor Hills,
awful.
I went to Harbor Hills and a couple other places and did workshops with their leadership team and said, there's no reason that you're putting everybody on the bus to go out. And these people were like, oh
At
my,
extreme
what-
expense, at
what is
extreme
I
expense
know
and headache.
what is she telling my owners, you know,
That's
kind
why
of
they
thing.
loved you. That's
And
why
they-
cricket became a superstar.
Well, they what happened was, and Skip did it at Harbor Hills, he gave each of his directors an allotment of money to go to the dollar store, to go to places. They all had a bin somewhere in camp or in their car trunk. Some of them left them in their trunk so nobody else would be able to use them. And they had stuff that when they had to run a rainy day, they already had some ideas, because they knew they weren't going to get put on the buses to go out of camp. And you know, everybody can't leave camp. And now, you know, with some of the overnights in New York where I work now, camp's not going. There will be no trips. That's not even an option to go out of camp this summer. So
Cricket said that she was retired, but she's really not retired, because she's teaching arts and crafts at a beautiful Camp Walden up in New York State with our friend the Bernsteins. So yeah, I think, you know, camps that are just so trained to take your kids away, you know, listen to what Tiff was saying about running camp in a church. Like, you could do it. Rock, paper, scissors. You could do rock and paper, scissors with 200 people and just dwindle it down to one. Like, it takes time and it's fun and people really get into it. I know it sounds silly, but it's old school, and the reason why it still exists is because it's still fun.
Yep,
Plain
and
and
it's
simple.
no prop, low prop. We would do like dance parties because the kids were super into music. We would do like spoken word. We would like have your own rap battle, and then let the kids be judges. And we would also use those days for like STEM days, so they could like podcast or comment. Like, so if because the kids would be on the side, instead of just like talking trash about each other's games, like we'd have them commentate the games, and like so we have like a marketing team that wrote it up, and then these kids are photographers, so like they're sports photographers, so we kind of just like would symbolize what it would look like to be at a real sporting event, and kind of like gave them jobs. We also, and I don't know like what other camps do, but we'd have like cleaning days, like who can clean all the things, and kind of just reorganize, and then set them into teams, and whoever like came back with the best looking space got to pick something. And so for us, that was just like, you know, like tricking our kids that, hey kids, want to do, you know, something like, and when I say tricking our kids, like our own personal kids, like how I would do at home with my nieces and nephews, except for we had 200 kids who were broken into teams to kind of do this. I'd love to hear, Cricket, what you think, or if you encountered like games that you think would be ideal for kids who are used to lots of movement and might have a more confined space.
There's so many great resources out there too that we don't use. Michelle Cummings with Training Wheels has great email that she sends out. Jim Kane has great things. When I was cleaning to move, I found all my old new games books, which were I don't even know when those were written, and some Carl Ronke books, and some of those have just some great things that are relay races, things that someone has to do something else. Everybody, lots of overnight camps do like what's called a Dutch auction or a scavenger hunt. And I mean, you can do a scavenger hunt where the kids are sitting in teams, and you say you need someone with 2 different sneakers and the first person up front, or they need 3 shirts on, or some of those kinds of things, or blue eyes, or whatever, hair and braids. You know, some of those things take nothing other than some enthusiasm to get kids involved. And the minute they do, they just love it. But there's been a lot of people at all the conferences. Jim Kane's great, Michelle Cummings. They both have great
exceptional
things.
Well, one thing I would add to that list for Tiff, and even your sport kids, I think it would be sort of funny, is when okay, so it's going to rain for the next couple hours, let's say, okay, this is what we're doing. We're having a talent show. Each one of your groups, you guys have 25 minutes. Come up with something. You need a music. We give you music, all that kind of thing. And, a half hour from now, we're having a talent show. Plain and simple. And like you said, like Tiff's like, well, some people could do spoken word. Some people can write a rap. Some people can do a dance. Some people, can be all different things. And usually if you have a group of a dozen or so kids, there's going to be one musician there. There's going to be a couple of kids that are creative, that way. And it becomes a great bonding experience. It could end up being like the highlight of the summer. They can end up like singing that cheer, the rest of the summer, just because of a rainy day.
Yeah.
Well, when I was a kid, we did brown bag dramatics, where you got a brown grocery bag and it had like 12 items in it, and you had to come up with a skit around whatever those 12 items were. It's amazing how creative they can be without having a lot of things to give them too. But give them some time and let them perform. That's great.
No, I totally agree with that. And it sparks their own creativity, right? They're so often used to being given an exact task to do in a certain way with certain rules, especially when you're within the confines of a sport. We can always make, mix up how we play a sport, but just, I love that idea of a brown bag. It reminds me of a recruiting thing that we used to do with or onboarding thing we used to do with our staff, where we would give envelopes to each group, and then they wouldn't be able to create the thing based on the things in their envelope. And so they had to go and collaborate with the other teams in order to get the final thing done. And I think that the theory behind it was, let's see which team is going to go and seek help, and who's going to just try to figure it out on their own, or who's going to like go and try to steal the supplies from the other team. So it's funny that the same things that we use to train staff are the things that we can use with kids. And the when you mentioned sneakers or a shirt or whatever, another thing that came to mind was this game called Soulmates. And you'd be like, find your soulmate, and you would basically look for the person whose shoes were similar to your shoes, and that's what made you a soulmate. And so that
Oh,
just
that's
little
cool. I like
things
that.
that take time.
Yeah. And we got this thing called the interweb, where there's like resources out the freaking wazoo. I mean, when I was a kid, if I wanted to come up with rainy day things, I had to call Cricket on that telephone and talk into it, and write notes down. Now you can just write rainy day games at camp, and it'll be like, bam, right? That guy, I'm sure that guy,
Yep.
Kurt, has like pages and pages of it.
Oh, Kurt Jackson's got
Kurt
great.
Jackson.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah.
He's got wonderful things. Yep.
So,
Cricket, you said earlier that if you prepare ahead of time, like, do you do, for instance, Minute to Win It, we do bins full of each activity that you can pull out to be your stations, but you could do that with charades. You could just do envelopes for charade stuff, so you've got it ahead of time. I know you've got a bunch of other things that you pre-package ready to go.
Yeah, well, we had this spot at the bottom of the stairs that was kind of just nothing, and we put shelves at Sesame Rockwood, and we had bags with games, and we labeled the games, because if you take a Connect 4 game out to your bunk to use, and you say to the kids, do you have it all? Well, they have no idea what all is. They need to know there's 12 red checkers, 12 black checkers, or there's 52 cards, a spinner, and whatever, so they know what to give back. But some of the things were simple, like Pictionary, where there was just paper and pens and cards. They didn't need a whole big setup to play something like that. And the charades in the envelopes, they just need to know what resources they have that you can help them with if they've never done it. So seeing what's there and practicing some things and doing them and getting their input. They do have some ideas, or they'll go on the internet and come back tomorrow with some ideas that they looked
yeah,
up.
I have to say, in my years of doing this, I have stopped buying board games for rainy days, because generally speaking, so you get like, name a game, Candyland, whatever the heck it is, right? Like after that first rainy day, like you're not getting like what comes back is going to be minimal.
Well, that's where you got to have a plan to have. If you are
Yeah.
going to use board games, you have to have a plan for, okay, when they return it, it goes here.
Yeah.
And then you hand
Well,
out.
and you have to start it off by putting everything in Ziploc bags and all that stuff. Don't just bust out that game brand new. I mean, I used to go to the dollar store every year and spend $100 and get all these games, but it became like, like napkins, disposable napkins. Like the kids just didn't care about them. To me,
at overnight camp, sometimes
it's different.
having a bunk where you've got some games in the bunk, and if the kids want to play, they may sit down and play, or there may be a game that is ongoing, and they keep track of it and they leave it there and don't touch it because we're not finished with this game. And sometimes you got to have the right time and place in order to play those things, but you need to have a system to have them organized. Any of that.
There was a camp near us called the Urban Ecology Center, and that's where we did like all of our nature sports stuff. And they had a cabinet, and they had leaves, like they had decorated like these wooden leaves, and they had the name for each game. And so they literally had like an inventory check-in, check-out system where you have to check it out from a gatekeeper and check it back in, because I have the same problem. If I had another broken Connect 4 game or another sorry game with nobody's, I'm just like, I don't have a budget like the YMCA. This is my money. Like, you all need to stop losing the pieces. And so we did have them taking more. I think it was just the idea that there was a responsibility or accountability to check it in and out, made the kids act a little more responsible in that regard. And also, like, these are the games we have, so when these are gone, there's no more, and you'll be bored. But another thing that we did to combat that was we had all of these giant games. So like, I know there's a place here in Chicago called Punch Bowl Social. There's one in Milwaukee also, but it's like an adult arcade. So there's like a giant Jenga, a giant Connect Four, and those pieces they can't lose, right? So we had a giant ring toss. We just started getting giant like, you're not gonna lose these pieces because they're the size of your head. So
if those of you that go to ACA Tri-State or ACA National, if you go to the exhibit hall, there's always people selling that kind of stuff. I recommend it highly. Giant Legos, doesn't have to be made by Lego, by the way. It could be imitation Legos. It's just perfectly fine. Connect 4, giant Connect 4 is the best. That's easy. It's not, the pieces don't go flying that bad. It's nice and compact. But
that's one where there used to be one in the basement at Sesame Rockwood, and they'd play with it, and then they'd go to leave it instead of making sure they were all back in there. And we ended up just buying extras so then you could count them and put them back. But those kind of things are great. Jenga you can make, and it doesn't matter if you play that outside and it's wet.
Well, if you were starting a camp and you said, what do I get for rainy days? And you have the space, you got to have the space, maybe not in the church, but those big knock hockey boards are the best. Like that, all the way through my camp career, I've seen those things. When those come out, the kids get so excited. Talk about an old school game.
Yep,
that kids just get completely pumped up to play knock hockey with the red sticks and the wooden puck. Like that thing rules, I mean, and you can just buy a dozen of those things. Again, buy extra pucks, extra sticks. All right. But those things are relatively indestructible. And if they do break, I've actually had my maintenance people fortify them around the sides with like stronger wood so that they stick together more. But that takes me to the question I want to ask you, Craig. I'll put you on the spot. Say, okay. So hi there, Cricket. I'm this like young camp director person, and I just got put in charge of Camp Wiggy Wammy, and I have I have money to spend, not too much, but what should I do to get ready for rainy days? Like, how would I start this thing? Because a lot of people listen to us who are new to day camps. I get lots of emails and Facebook messages from people that are like, oh, this is so great because I just started a day camp. I didn't know where to start. So where do you start, Cricket?
Well, I do like having stuff available for people because I don't think everybody has an idea of what you can do. And by showing them some of the things you have and how you can use them, and talking to the younger staff to say, okay, you're not going to have your phone. We need to do something with your kids. What did you like to do? And see what they can buy into. I think that's important. But it's also the owner, the director, that person who has that, we're not putting you on buses. Here's what you have. We're not putting in any more tents. You got to look at what you've got and how can you do those things within that area. And I would still buy some of the things, some of the games and stuff. I'm one of those yard sale people that someone will say, oh, it's only a quarter. It's missing a checker. I'm like, missing a checker's my life. It's still got 23 other ones, so I would just sit down and come up with some basic ideas of what you could do, what's allowed, and what we can do outside, what we can do inside, what we have. And I would give them some money to spend to have some things that are kind of theirs for their group, because I think there comes some ownership with that. And Joel Shapiro will tell you there's a book called, I think it's the Great American Book of Sidewalk, Stoop, Dirt, and Alley Games. It is the oldest book, and it's probably somewhere on used books, but it's all the kind of, flipping the coins against the wall and things you would have played, stoop ball, things that take nothing to play, but old school. It doesn't take a lot. And I do
Yeah.
think you're right about counselors having to have something in their backpack, a bag with some things in, so that they could run an activity. But they have to practice and try it because a lot of them have never done it.
Yeah, I think there's something to that, how you talked about just being prepared and practicing, right? Because it's almost like the default could be, oh, well, we're just here, we don't know what to do. Even when you have like a list of back pocket games, that it's almost like the counselors themselves need the motivation to try it on or to try it out. And I think it is amazing. I went to Project Play, I think that's what it's called, a conference in Detroit once, I think Aspen's Project Play. And there was a kid there who was doing a campaign about how play was leaving, American children don't play anymore and all of this whole thing. And I am notorious for like not letting kids beat me at games. And he had me playing wall ball. Like, what is wall ball? All we were doing is smacking the ball against the wall for almost an hour, right? So it's great cardio. Like, I was definitely winning. I was winning. And it
The
was,
kids love that game.
it's just wall ball.
Heck
You're
yeah.
just smacking against the wall. And so many kids, kids were walking by looking, and even the adults. So just like, I think it, like anything in terms of being a camp counselor, the energy is transferable. And when
Yep.
the counselors feel prepared, when they're confident that they can do it, when it's made fun, it gets done.
Yeah. And what you're talking about of taking like a wall ball game, which is generally an outdoor game, you could even do it indoors against a wall in a hallway if you're in like a school situation like that. And Gaga, you turn a bunch of tables or benches on their side and you got a Gaga court. Make one, right? Foursquare, right? Just lay some tape down, and you're wherever you are. You could have a really small Foursquare court. You could have a real big one. Playground games are adaptable. That's the beautiful part of playground games.
Well, we used to play buns on floor beach ball volleyball. So you
Yeah,
had the court and you sat on
exactly.
the floor, and two people
Yeah.
held
No.
either a net or yarn up, and you used a beach ball and you sat down, and so you weren't running around. Some of those old school things that they're coming back, and it's just a matter of a counselor feeling confident or enthusiastic about something. A good counselor can make anything exciting.
Mm-hmm.
They could take that deck of cards and come up with something to do every day if it rained with that same one deck of cards. So
yeah, it's true, and it's very funny. When we first started, our default was definitely, okay, well, we're going bowling, or okay, well, we're going skating. But as we grew and we needed more staff, it was funny because the staff who had been with us since since inception would be like, wait, but okay, well, what are we doing today? And then one of the coaches, all of a sudden, I guess the aha clicked on for her over time. She's like, oh wait, we are the entertainment. I'm like, yeah, you are the entertainment. Like, we can't spend, as we grow, we can't afford to pay. We could have less staff and just take the kids on trips, or you all can be, creative and do some things. The smallest things, for no prop, low props. Another game that would last forever was just like turning onto music, and then all of a sudden you yell out a number, and it'd be like 4, and they got to get in a group of 4, and the odd person is out, or 10, or so because then they're using their skills, they're running to get together. I mean, and it's COVID now, so it's everything has changed. But and then there's that other game, I don't know if it's called like Bear, Lion, something, where you turn back to back and then you flip around and you're trying to make the same animal symbol at the same time. And you can do them in all sorts of group pairings. So I think, yeah, the low prop, no prop situation is the way to go for rainy days, because it's just,
and a lot of places, like you said, there's expensive going out, Tiff. It's expensive going to the bowling alley, dealing with buses, and then what it costs per kid, and then of course you gotta feed them when they're there and all that. For the cost of one trip to the movie theater with popcorn, you could buy a video projector. They're not that expensive nowadays. And you could throw that up on a white wall and bam, you're done. You don't even need a screen, right? Technology is cheap nowadays. Like, you got to use it.
you could do your whole summer on Minute to Win It.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
with solo cups and ping pong balls, there are so many games just with solo cups and ping pong balls.
And
No,
when you're
so-
setting that up, if you've got a dice, you can have one person put up 6 numbers on the wall. The kids go to those numbers, they roll the dice. If you're at the number, you're out. And they'll play that for hours while the rest of you are setting up your stations for your minute to win it.
I love minute to win it games.
Yeah.
And the kids really love the ones that had the edible thing. Like we did face the cookie, where you like put the cookie on your forehead and you gotta like move it down to get it into your mouth. Of course, they do it over a table because they were not having their cookies falling on the floor. Yeah, there's another one called, I think, Soup It Up, which that one kind of got a little bit disgusting because there's so much saliva involved, but they use a straw to move either Skittles or an M&M from one plate to the
Listen
other.
to these wonderful pre-COVID games. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to think about how you can change that,
Oh,
depending on what's
2022.
going on.
Saliva's coming back in 2022.
Well, I was
Tiff.
coming back to camp.
Making a comeback. Yeah.
Maybe it was never supposed to be there in that way, but no,
Yeah,
definitely.
I know.
But you look at the plates and it's just like a rainbow, and you realize like this is kind of disgusting, but they didn't share
Yeah.
plates, so it was okay.
Yeah, well, look, there's a million resources out there for Minute to Win It, including the Jimmy Fallon YouTube videos. And we talk about Minute to Win It like at least every other episode here. It's I think it's like the central part of Sam's programming, frankly, at our camp. So, all right, so we're gonna do a day camp tip of the week, okay? But first, I want to tell you about my friends at AM Skyer, all right? Because they are a big part of putting together this Gratz College program, right? Gratz College is one of these online kind of colleges that has a partnership with AM Skyer, and they launched a Master's of Science in Camp Administration and Leadership, a program designed to empower camp professionals with the knowledge and skills necessary for successful camp leadership. It is curated and run, many of the courses are run by our friend of the pod, Dave Malter, who's terrific with it. Check it out. It's a master's degree in camp administration and leadership, and it is all online, right? Gratz College. Yeah, it's there. And again, AM Skyer is one of the leading insurance and strategic partners for many of the finest camps in America for 101 years. AM Skyer has been supporting camps in PR, legal, health, facility management, general safety, and more. Experience the difference at amskyer.com. So for my friends on the East Coast, Cricket, you weren't up camp last year because your camp sleepaway camps couldn't open in New York last year. But for the camps on the East Coast that opened, we all got a hefty dose of tropical storm craziness and severe weather, thanks to all the global warming that we're part of now. So what happened during these moments is that we would go under. So my camp is all outdoors. It's either pavilions and tents, and nobody wanted to go near any tents because tents have metal poles and therefore they're going to get electrocuted. That's how everybody thought. So then everybody go into the wooden things, and then we had, social distancing issues. And that's why we literally had to cancel camp 2 days this summer, which I've never done in my 25-year career until this year. So I went out this year. So I was like, how can we get lightning protection on these tents, right? So I called the tent manufacturer that we get our tents from, one of the biggest tent manufacturers on the East Coast. Guy sells millions and millions of dollars of tents. And I asked him, what do you guys do for lightning protection? And his response to me was, he put me on hold. He said, let me ask, some of my people that work here. And he came back 5 minutes later and he says, I got nothing. No one's ever asked that question before. I said, are you serious? You're selling these $10,000, $20,000 tents and nobody has asked you that question? Nope, nobody has ever asked me that question. So I asked my electrician. I figured if anyone knows electricity, me and my electrician. And he said, there's companies out there. This is what they do for a living. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, I think there's one in Trenton, like a few miles away. And I Googled lightning protection, and don't you know it? There's literally companies that this is what they do. So long story short, actually long story long, we hired this lightning company, and they are coming in and they are lightning protecting every one of my tents this year. I'm spending, $15,000 just to do my tents. And then next year I'm going to do my buildings. And basically they're putting these metal, things like, spikes.
Lightning rods.
On my tents, separated like every 15 feet or whatever it is. And then they're connected to a cable, that cable runs off the side, just like your tents are being held by those cables too. It goes down the side and goes into these metal spikes like giant nails that go 12 feet into the ground. Okay. And yeah, it's an investment, but guess what? Ain't nobody going to be complaining about going under the tents this year because we got lightning protection now. And according to them, it's just, it's not like anything would have necessarily happened anyway, but it's just another layer of playing it safe. Just like with the whole COVID thing. Well, you got masks, you got social distance, you got this, you got that, vaccines and all, right? Nothing really necessarily protects you 100%. It's the same thing with lightning protection. It's another layer of protecting people. And according to this company, these guys do county fairs and state fairs, and they do other like things with big tents and stuff. And to them, they think it's crazy for people to be putting up tents without lightning protection. So there you go. Sure, find a person near you. All right, Sam.
All right. So we talked about scavenger hunts briefly, and you know about the photo scavenger hunts where you take a picture of a certain thing and that's how you're doing it all on your phones or whatever. But if you are stuck inside and you've got the kids playing with one or two counselors, the other counselors can take whatever theme you're doing that week and just cut out things for you to hide around the building. And then you can have a scavenger hunt where you have to find 5 leprechauns and 7 shamrocks and all this different stuff that goes with your theme, but you've got to hide some high, some low, and station your counselors around to give extra clues, because you break the kids up into either their small cohort or even just partners, and they've got the sheet and they've got to find each of the items. And so the counselors are there to help give them hints and ask them if they looked in the bathroom, or did you look under the tables, did you look, until they find everything. But you can do a scavenger hunt inside at the last minute.
This is turning into like the old school game episode. That's what this is turning like. Liquid Sunshine equals old school games. Kids love scavenger hunt. There's no way around it. There's no way around it, man. They love it. I've never seen a group say, "What are we doing? Scavenger hunt," and go, "Aw." No, they're always like, "Yeah," right?
Especially if there's food at the end, right? Some kind of snack.
Food. Well, look, you know what? This is an important thing about Liquid Sunshine and the games associated with it. And I learned this from a guy I used to work with, Mark Maggot at Black Bear, right? Which is like, we're a healthy camp. We don't have anything, like that's unhealthy very much for the kids. We have ices or ice creams, things like that occasionally. But for these kind of moments, we have picnics on the weekend, and we got cases and cases of soda, cans of soda, right? And let me tell you what a kid would do for a can of soda in the middle of a hot summer day. They will literally do anything. And if you say we're doing a scavenger hunt, everyone's doing it, every group, and the winners, you're all getting a can of soda. Okay. I'm telling you folks, that's going to run you about $5. Okay. And you are going to have 15 happy kids from that.
Absolutely.
All right, Tiff, you're up.
That is so funny. So because I'm always trying to entertain my staff as much as the kids, one tip I have is to just like flip the things that adults like to do for fun for kids. So like adults in my genre are always looking for are always attending like paint and sips. So we do like paint and sips but with smoothies for the kids. We do I'm so funny. We do cocktails and karaoke for the adults. And so
that's awesome. Like, I love that. Such a great idea.
And then we do, there was one more, paint and sip, cocktails and karaoke. We turned it to mocktails. And the third one was, I'm drawing a blank, but there's one more thing.
It's a great concept. While you're thinking, it's just a great concept right there of taking things that adults do and letting kids do them. Right? I mean, that paint and sip thing. I mean, how funny is that?
Oh, I remember the vision boards. So we, like adults always do vision boards at the beginning of each, for New Year's or whatever. But so at the beginning of each semester, we would, because we run year round, but at the beginning of each season, we would have the kids do vision boards. I wrote a book actually, it's what's called Blurry Brown Eyes, a kid's book about vision. and the kid cast his vision for what he wanted his life to look like, really kind of like mocking what adults do all of the time. And so they would do that at the beginning of the season, and then on rainy days we would go and update your vision to kind of like mesh it. Is it still a goal? Is it not a goal? Did you attain the goal? You know, kind of what's next, to get them in the mindset, like Cricket said, of planning, and like not it always being something planned for you, but something that you do, because they're just really little people. And so those are skills that they need, that, you know, there's no app for that, there's no class for that. And so camp made a perfect space for us to be doing those things.
Love it.
Yeah,
Love it so
Walden, we
much.
call it paint and pastry, and they get a Pop Tart.
Very cool.
Oh man.
Yep, you got to make sure you got the right number of Pop Tarts, though, you know, so nobody gets left out. So
All right, Cricket, you're up. You got a gem besides that. That's a good one. We'll put that in there. But that one, putting that next, that still goes under Tiff's category with the paint and sip. But all right.
I love her thing about, you know, games that adults are playing. You can make them into things that kids can do. But I think my biggest thing is just ask your staff, get ideas from them, let them do some research, start Googling, looking on Pinterest. You will find those fun things and activities to do that don't take a lot. And now you can go on YouTube and watch somebody do anything, you know. So I mean, I love some of Jimmy Fallon's games. They, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, there was a period of time where I thought my program team was just genius, the stuff they were coming up with. And then I found out it was all from Pinterest. They're genius at looking at Pinterest.
That's perfect.
Well, and there's also, I think, another thing that's fun to do. I did it one time at ACA in Cincinnati, I remember, and I was trying to think of, total brain dead about who the director, he used to be at Waziati in New Hampshire. And one of the things that their group picked was a pink flamingo. And because I happen to love pink flamingos. So the plastic flamingo, and they had to come up with a special event that they could tie around that. They had to come up with activities. They played flamingo baseball. So they used a wiffle ball and held the flamingo by the head and hit the ball with the body. You know, so if you give people things and say, what do you think you can do with this? It's amazing what they'll come up with.
You know what that makes me think about, and this is, I guess, a last minute tip, but I am notorious, like I like to do the things that the kids already think are cool. So like they know how to do TikToks, I know how to do TikToks. You know how to do Instagram Reels, I know how to do Instagram Reels. And the cool thing about letting them do that stuff and putting it around campus, that it teaches them a different and more positive way to like flip the rap songs into something, into like lyrics that are actually fruitful, so that they can, you know, pick up something different than what they're just getting off of the radio. But also, you know, as long as you have the proper disclosures and photo releases, we use all that sort of stuff as part of our social media marketing. And so parents would just, you know, be enthralled, like, oh my gosh, did you all see what they did? And the kids would make like theme songs about camp and use the letters and turn them into acronyms and all sorts of things. So it really like serves, that wasn't the original rationalization, but over time we were totally able to use those assets as like, look at what those kids at Camp Play are doing. And it totally helps you set yourself out against your competition.
It's good. All right, we got to wrap up, folks. So just one other word of advice for the camp director that has never run a camp before outside in the liquid sunshine at a day camp. There is going to be a population of kids that get freaked out by thunder, freaked out. So you sort of need a safe house for them. And, you know, there were times where I have limited facilities. The safe house was my office because that was the only indoor facilities. And I had a little couch in my office, and those 5 kids just sat there and cried, you know, while it was thundering outside. And remember, like, at least in New Jersey, the statistics is 1 out of every 60 kids is on the autistic spectrum. Generally speaking, kids on the autistic spectrum don't really like loud noises, and thunder is really loud. So it's just one of those things to sort of keep in mind as like a plan B for those folks. All right. I want to thank the Go Camp Pro team, AM Skyer, commercial recreation specialist, for allowing us to bring this podcast to you. If you like what you hear, you should subscribe to the Day Camp Pod on your favorite podcast platform. Check out our show notes from this. Now, Cricket, you have a homework assignment. All these amazing things that you've been spouting If you could send that in an email to me, I will get it to my boy Matt, and we will put it in the show notes. Okay, like a good link for Michelle Cummings and Jim Kane and all these great resources. That would be really, really great. So anyway, go to daycamppodcast.com to see these show notes, as well as contact info for our friend Cricket, for our guests, and our wonderful co-hosts, Sam and Tiff. So thanks for listening and making yourself a better day camp professional. We'll be back next week with a mini pod, and in 2 weeks with another full episode of the Day Camp Pod.